There we are, Sam. Welcome to Signals from the Ashes. This is the Phoenix Firms podcast. And so happy to have you here. A new day. And my name is Ben. I'm looking after AI and process improvement. And this is Sam, our CEO and founder of the podcast. No, the podcast. Well, yes, the podcast, but also the Phoenix Firm. So, Sam, what are we talking about today?
Today, we are talking about KPIs. And the reason for that, right, is we're finishing one year. We're about to start a new year at time of recording, that is. Um, and I think a lot of people are thinking, okay, how did we do last year? How are we going to get better? And a lot of people think, okay, we need to have good KPIs. And it goes to, okay, what is a good KPI, right? And what's the value of it? And what is really a KPI?
Yeah, exactly. Because obviously, whether it's end of year, end of month, end of day for that matter, we have a lot of data. And it's often very difficult then to determine, well, what do I need versus what do I not need? And how do I use that to make the right decisions? Am I measuring what is of value to me? Am I seeing what is of value to me? And then can I trust it and can I make the right decisions based on it? In my experience, very often there's just way too much of it. There's a lot of data and it can be very confusing. Some leaders will look at these pieces and others will look at these pieces and they can be completely conflicting. We are trying to make the right decisions.
Yeah. And it's interesting what you're saying. A lot of people think, okay, data means KPIs or data means metrics. No, data will support your metrics, will support your KPIs. But again, if you have too many of them, it's for just like any of us as passenger of an airplane, when we get into, and look at what the pilot and the co-pilot of the airplane look at, there's so many little things, right? What do they mean? What do they do? How do you know how to react? I mean, nobody should have to go to years of courses and of training in order to be able to understand a KPI, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it just, that illustration, if I'm looking inside the cockpit of a plane and I'm thinking, how quickly are we going to crash? Does he really know everything that's there? And that's absolutely true. There's so much data that's there. But like you said, do I need to go to university just to learn how to read a report?
Yeah. And I think the best starting point, right? What is a KPI, right? Simply put, really, a KPI should be a metric that informs a decision, but it should actually be able to drive improvement as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, often we can do KPIs of too many things. And the employees who are being measured can often feel like they just have someone sitting on their shoulder looking at all kinds of little pieces of information that don't necessarily even matter. Like just my experience in the customer support perspective um, is that you could be monitoring so many things that don't really even speak to the customer and what they need. And so the employees themselves, the support advisors are feeling like they're just being overlooked like crazy. And yet there isn't that emphasis that really is on, well, what does this mean for the customer themselves? Like it can
Yeah.
just be overwhelming then to the leaders too, because if they're having the wrong conversations because of the data that they're looking at or that they're using, the KPIs that they're using, um, it can, yeah, it can make the conversation very difficult.
And sometimes just lead to no conversation at all, right?
Yeah.
There's an expression called the vanity metric, right? The metrics that
Yeah.
we have that we monitor just to tap ourselves in the back,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, at one point, we were talking to a client and they reached out and said, we want to look at our fill rate, our order fill rate. Okay,
Mm.
no problem. We gave all the spectrum, how the industry calculates it, how it should be looked at, all the comparisons. And then they started saying, we started looking at the numbers and we saw that they were all 100%. And we started asking questions about it. Like, how does that work? Like, this is truly incredible. What's your secret? And the secret was in their business model, they did not accept any back orders.
Mm.
So every order that came in, they only entered what could be shipped. Therefore, order fill rate was always 100%.
Right, of
So
course.
that's
That's
a
what we
beautiful
should be.
example. Yeah, but
Yeah.
that's a beautiful example of the vanity metric. It's a number. People pay to see a number that they know will always be great and make them look great as well, right? And I mean, that's an example of a KPI that really has no real help in making decisions.
Yeah, it's true. I remember years ago when I was working in the contact center space, we always used a metric that we would use to monitor efficiencies, which was called TSF or total service factor, and you're measuring how much of your your calls or interactions you are answering within a 20-second window, and your goal is to be between say 70 and 80%. If you go higher than that, you actually need to increase your workforce significantly,
Mhm.
high percentages, um, and it can cost a lot, and what you end up with is a lot of downtime, a lot of dead time where there's no interactions happening. And so that number needs to be sitting at, yeah, between 70 or 80%. And I remember one of our executives came in and we were showcasing the environment and what it all looks like. And um, we were so proud to tell him that we were at that 80% threshold exactly. And, we're so happy to be there because, for a contact center world, okay, you're at like 100%, you're right where you should be. But the number is 80%. And of course, the executive, they don't know any of that. They don't get that. They don't know what that number even means, or what it's measuring. And so, the first response that they get is like, well, no, one day I hope you'll get to 100%. And from,
Yeah.
from an operational perspective, it's like, that's not the goal. Right? But they don't know that. And that's the thing is you can give so much data about something and even be proud of the numbers that you're looking at. Like you said, vanity metrics, and you're proud of it, but what does it even mean? And I think that that's where it needs to be distilled down to, yeah, the lowest common denominator, but what makes sense to the user, the end reader of that data, and then how do they use that to guide the decisions that they're making. But let me ask you a question, Sam. Just you're the data expert, you're the KPI guy for sure. How do you start the process? Like, what do you need to do to actually look at and define what are going to be the KPIs that we even measure?
I think there's really 3 points that need to be looked at when we try to define a KPI, right? And that's why we wanted to call the episode the KPI Playbook, right? Um, the first rule is really tie every KPI to a decision, right? For instance, the question could be asked, what will we do differently if this number changed? To your
Hmm.
point, 80%, if it goes up, goes down, how will you drive really your business forward because of that number, right?
Yeah.
So rule number one, KPI equals decision. Now, the rule
Okay.
number two would be focus on the outcome, not the activity. So an activity requires effort, but an outcome really drives impact. So an activity could be how many calls are made, but the outcome is how many deals are closed, right? So having a KPI on how many calls were made, okay, that's useful. But how many calls created a deal close? That's really what we want to see. And the percentage really makes sense, talks volume about, hey, the sales skills of the person that's on the salesperson that's on the phone, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, focus on outcome, not activities. And the last one is fewer KPI will lead to more clarity. And
Hmm.
again, going back to the dashboard of the pilots and the co-pilots. For us, it really means nothing. There's so much noise. And I think it speaks to that. If there is so many KPIs the organization is keeping track of, it becomes so noisy. And then some part of the organization will focus on those three. And then it really creates uh, a division of focus. That's the word,
Hmm.
right? And now nobody really knows what they're supposed to talk to address, work on, because there are so many red flags everywhere. There are so many alarms going off. Which one do we address first? And that's where having fewer KPIs that are really meaningful will actually give really good clarity.
So who decides that? Like, how do you come to that conclusion where, I'm going to do this with this and this, and it makes sense for me? But usually we're in group settings. And so, if you're a solopreneur, then great, you can do what you want to do. But in these settings, it's coming to that right conclusion together as a group. So how do you do that?
I think it boils down to having a proper vision and mission statement as a company,
Mhm.
right? I work in an organization that we're great for the customer service team to know exactly how their work impacted the patient or the
Mhm.
greater vision of the company, right? Um, Even in supply chain and finance, somebody that's doing AR, AP, how is their work actually impacting the greater vision of the organization? And in an organization that's do have that clarity, it becomes a second nature, right? To understand what are the KPIs that will drive that impact, that will be in line with that focus, with that lane that they want to keep on.
I love that because that really is asking more of the employees, isn't it? Because it's about not just, carrying out what's in your job description. Yes, it may be, written here. This is what you do. This is the long list of things you need to accomplish. But it takes it to the next level of let's think about the organization itself. What are we trying to accomplish as an organization? Okay, so then once you have the bigger picture and you can see, why the organization even exists, that takes thought, right? But then now, as you bring it in a little bit more narrow, you start to think about, okay, well, what about our larger department, our particular department or team, and then me? So that if I can see all of those pieces, then I can understand, okay, well, then what really makes sense to measure, first of all, and then report on? Because we may be continually measuring a lot of information, and that's will always be there. But what am I reporting on? Because you know, you may be very, focused on this one thing because that is maybe addressing exactly what's in your job description. But then if you, scale out and look at it much larger, okay, if you were to report on you at the CEO level, what are what would did they need, and what means something to them? And I think that obviously that would help them make the wise decisions.
Yeah.
And as you go a little bit closer, then it starts to make much more sense to all employees to even understand, why am I here, right? Like, what am I even doing in this role?
How many of us have fitted in a quarterly meeting with the greater organization
Mhm.
and you sit and numbers, 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 that means nothing to you, right? The only thing you think through the whole thing is, wow, we made a lot of money and my paycheck is very little.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
right? But if you can flip the script and really have meetings where KPIs are presented in a way that it reflects the impact on the business. Okay, our call volume was up because of these new product launch, and the feedback was 90% positive. It was inquiry about the platform that drove improvements on the UI, the UX.
Yeah,
That's what we want to see. That's what organizations should be focused on.
yeah,
And sometimes, to your point, right, the 80% of the call time that people waited to be picked, have the phone picked up.
hmm,
That is such a good example of 80% is what you want. You don't want 80, 100%. You don't want 50, 40. So being able to say, okay, this is our metric, but this is what we were targeting. This was
right,
the budget. This was the target. This was what we had last year. And how has that impacted our end users? How has that impacted the vision of the company, right? And I
yeah.
think people are so much more engaged when they understand what is being said relates to them in what fashion. how does that affect them, right? And it's not that people are, narcissists or anything. It's human nature. We want to know how we are involved in it. We want to be part of something greater than us. And that's a beautiful way to get that engagement from the employees to understand KPIs, to understand how they contribute to it and how they contribute to the greater part of the organization.
Yeah, exactly, Sam. And that's really where this conversation takes us in a couple of different directions because, yes, we need the right KPIs to make the right decisions for the organization. And that we're measuring the right things. Of course we do. But then also now, as we shift, the conversation starts to talk about actually engagement for the employees.
Yeah.
Engagement, which is so critical for the whole organization to be successful. Because if they're not engaged, they're just filling a role or a need that they don't even really understand or necessarily even care about. Which some employees may be like that, but those are the ones that we're challenged most with because there's maybe zero engagement. So as you say, reporting on the right information is and they can see exactly why they're there helps them to push as much as they can, push, but to give their best for the organization because they know what it means. They actually understand what it means, and that goes beyond a pizza lunch,
Yeah.
right? Or just here's an award. Like, why is any of that even being done? Well, again, it speaks to what is being accomplished, and are we aligned to what we are looking to achieve? So that playbook around, what are we trying to achieve in the first place? Right? What are we actually looking to do? And then, how do we do all of that? How do those decisions get made? But then, of course, we speak to, well, then what does that mean for the whole employee base and for all of that? And it just, I think it's great to go down that path because it does speak to engagement and what we will get or what we will achieve as an organization.
And I think that's a beautiful way to switch over to even everyone can do a self-assessment within the organization, right? Do self-check. Um, Ask the question, what does the KPI that we're looking at align with for the
Mhm.
business, right? What would we change behavior if a number moves? And another very good question is, can one person or one team influence the number? And who is it, right? Certain numbers are being looked at the department and they have no impact on it. Therefore, why are they looking at it? Why are they putting so much spotlight on it? And how are we as an organization making sure that the right team looks at the right KPI for the right objective of the organization, right?
Absolutely. And it actually helps leaders know what will impact their bottom line. And perhaps then within a larger organization, what relationships need to be developed so that it can influence the end result in the right way. Um, because perhaps if they're only focused on this one thing and yet it's being influenced by so much that you have no relationship in or no control over, then you're actually never going to be able to get what you need from this, even if you are measuring the right thing. So then it helps you understand, well, where else do I need to grow that relationship base so that I can perhaps influence this. And that's obviously from a leadership's perspective, but understanding the impact that they can have, um, not just within their own team, but perhaps beyond that, and where their partners are that maybe they didn't even think were partners.
Yeah. And I like the simple sentence that informs what KPI decide, right? Team will get things done based on the data, but really the KPI guides the direction and really shows the path clearly. And if um, the KPIs does not align with business goals, if they don't change behaviors, if nobody can influence it, we those KPIs should be rethought. That's not a good KPI. It's really just noise that you're throwing into the organization, hoping that it might trigger something. And that's not a way that an organization should be.
Yeah, exactly. Sam, that is a quick KPI playbook. I think we could go on and on and on about this, and we've helped so many to put this into practice in the right way. But yeah, like I said, we could go on all day. But thank you so much for your insights, and it's been great chatting about it. And thank you to all of you listening to our podcast today. And hope you got something great out of it. And please do share along and join us for our next podcast.
It's gonna be great. Thank you,
Yeah,
everyone.
absolutely. Thank you, everybody.